Greetings and welcome, everybody, to the Million Cat webinar of the month. It's so good to see so many familiar names in the chat, and also all those of you watching this afterwards in on-demand land. Welcome as well, and thanks for taking time out of your busy lives to be part of this. Today's webinar is brought to you by the number 702, and that is the rate at which the Million Cat counter is rolling today. That is 702 more lives saved each and every day of this year by organizations participating in the Million Cat Challenge. We are on track to reach 400,000 in about 6,000 more cats. By my math, that's about 9 more days. We are 40% of the way to a million, and that is the responsibility of every single shelter in the challenge and every single person working at every shelter. I want to thank Maddie's Fund, not just for giving us the platform to make this webinar possible today, but also for providing the support that makes the Million Cat Challenge possible. And this year, we're tackling the initiatives one every 2 months. And the initiative of the month is the one that comes at the very beginning, alternatives to intake. So what happens before a cat even walks through the doors of a shelter? And I'll tell you, all the initiatives are my favorite, and alternatives to intake is my favorite today. It's really about believing what's best in people and trusting them to do what's right if they have the help they need and the information that they need. And I think that's been a huge and incredibly freeing and positive shift for our profession for so long. And I started working in shelters in 1989. We really felt victimized by the public. We saw sort of the worst of the public. I think about a full-page ad that was taken out by a shelter, not ours, but in the region, that really resonated with me at the time. And it was a barrel of dead bodies, euthanized animals. One full page, and it said, "It's a dirty job." And then you turned the page, and the next full page of the newspaper said, "We couldn't do it without you." And from there, I went to be an animal control officer, and at that time I was like, yeah, we couldn't do it without all you irresponsible jerks out there dumping your pets on us. And then I was an animal control officer, and I realized, when I talked to people, they didn't want to be those jerks. At least 90+% of them didn't want to be jerks. They just didn't know what to do. They didn't have a car. They didn't know how to catch a feral cat. They didn't know how to deal with a cat peeing outside the litter box. And I'll tell you a story from my own life and the San Francisco SPCA, which is the organization that's bringing you today's webinar about that. So I'll just introduce the San Francisco SPCA. And I love this. Just before the webinar launched, I asked them how they'd like to be described, sort of their proudest thing about their organization. They wanted to be described as helping to create one of the safest cities in the United States. And I love that because it's not just about what happens at the shelter, but it's really what happens in their whole community. And I lived in San Francisco in 1975. I was 10. And I got a kitten from a neighbor, actually, because we heard that kittens from the San Francisco SPCA would be sick, and we couldn't afford to take care of a sick kitten, so we got a kitten from a neighbor. And the kitten got fleas. And our housemates complained, and we didn't know what to do. My mom had never had a pet. We didn't have much money. And she abandoned the kitten at Fisherman's Wharf, and she told me it would be fine. He would have plenty of fish to eat. And she really believed that. And she really believed she was doing the best thing for that cat. And so that's what I learned as a 10-year-old as the best thing to do when you have a cat that gets fleas. And so multiply that by the number of phone calls coming into the San Francisco SPCA call center every day, and all the 10-year-olds and all their moms and all the people who are struggling to do the right thing, and what it means to provide them with the information and help to make better choices and really be their best selves when it comes to pets. So with that, today we bring you Lisa Bassi, who serves as both the manager of the Client Contact Center at the San Francisco SPCA and an advocacy and campaign specialist. The San Francisco SPCA is not your ordinary call center. They've won call center awards for their excellent customer service, fielding over 13,000 calls a month. So one 10-year-old, one abandoned cat, times 13,000 calls a month. Joining her is Cynthia Kopek, Vice President of Marketing and Communications. We're excited to have them share with us today how they have successfully used their call center to help divert surrenders and most recently leveraged Salesforce to take the program a step further. Before we launch into this, just a reminder about questions. You're welcome to hold on to your questions, post them in the chat.
And feel free to ask questions if you need a little bit of clarification at any time. We can go ahead and ask them to pause and give us more details, but if it's not pertinent in that moment, we'll be holding questions till the end.
That was our Million Cat Wrangler, Mandy Newkirk. You'll be hearing more from her at the end, and a lot of you have emailed with her. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Lisa. Take it away.
Well, thank you so much. That was a wonderful introduction. My name is Lisa Bassi, and I'm the Client Contact Center Manager here with Cynthia Kopek, Vice President of Marketing and Communications at the San Francisco SPCA. So before we really dive in, I just wanted to take a really quick poll. I'm just curious, how many of you are currently doing some sort of surrender diversion in any form? And just click the little green thumbs up if you're doing some sort of diversion, and thumbs down if not. Awesome. Okay, so it looks like about 69% of people do have some sort of diversion program in place, which is fantastic. And I really hope this can be helpful. And I'll talk a little bit about how we're using the phone as a tool here at the San Francisco SPCA. But first, just a really quick background about the San Francisco SPCA. We were founded in 1868, and we are the fourth oldest humane society in the United States. And we've definitely grown quite a bit over the years. Our current strategic vision is to end animal abandonment in San Francisco by the year 2020. And we're going to do that through education, prevention, and rescue. So it's a pretty big goal, but we're actually making really good progress towards that vision through a variety of programs that we have here, which include 2 adoption centers, 2 public veterinary hospitals, youth programs, a spay and neuter clinic, dog training, foster, animal-assisted therapy, advocacy, and my home department, the Client Contact Center. So there we are. That is our award-winning Client Contact Center. We are a team of 12 employees. And as Kate mentioned, we receive an average of 13,000 inbound calls per month, plus hundreds of emails from the public. And our calls and emails range anywhere from booking veterinary appointments to asking about animals available for adoption, emergency and medical triage, program questions, and of course, surrender inquiries. And of the 13,000 calls per month, about 100 of those are for surrenders. So quite a few. So already being familiar with medical triage, we know that gathering as much information over the phone before the person is right in front of us is incredibly helpful. And since we're also already fielding calls for surrenders, we thought, what if we applied the same ideas of medical phone triage to surrenders, where we gather as much information as possible and offer help before the person and animal even step foot into our building. So what that would look like for surrenders is instead of just booking an intake appointment and waiting to have a conversation when the person is right in front of us with their animal and with every intention to leave without their animal, could we somehow use the phone as a way to not only control the flow of intake, but prevent surrenders from even happening and getting us closer to our goal of ending animal abandonment? And the answer is yes, absolutely. And the best part about this program is it can literally be done anywhere, and it doesn't take much. All you really need to get started is a phone, a person, a script, and then a way to organize and track all of this information. In October of 2013, the call center officially kicked off our surrender prevention program. We started with a handful of scripts and tracked information on an Excel spreadsheet. And then in March of 2014, we began using Salesforce Service Cloud so we could track calls and open cases, manage, create, and improve our scripts, plus run some reports. And since March of 2014, we have prevented over 320 animals from entering the shelter, which is about 29% of all of our surrender calls. Okay, so here's how we got started. We kicked off by doing our homework and doing a lot of research. First, we went back through really old data. We reached out to various shelters, and of course, we drilled our port intake and adoption staff, who were very kind to us. And we finally came up with this list of the most common reasons people surrender their animals. So we have 5 main categories: behavior dog, behavior cat, life changes, housing, and then recent adopt or recent acquire. And then with this list, we started researching solutions. And the more solutions that we found, and the more resources that we came up with, we ran into our first roadblock. How would a team of 12 all feel comfortable and all feel knowledgeable coaching people through this really difficult decision with such an overload of information? And that's when we created scripts. For every reason for surrendering that we could think of, we created both a phone and an email version of the script. And we used the script as a roadmap for the conversation. Most of them include bullet points with helpful information, plus attachments that the associates could then send to the client. And with these easy scripts, all of our associates, including the newer ones, could feel comfortable with these potentially really difficult conversations. And not just feel comfortable, but actually be incredibly knowledgeable and become a solid resource for people needing our help. So I'm just going to take one more quick poll. We have given Mandy a zip file, which it sounds like will be available in the Yahoo group with an outline of all of these scripts. And I'm just wondering if this is something that you would be interested in or would find useful.
Lisa, while they're taking the poll, we've already had a question. A challenger wants to know, wanting to know whether or not people are calling you when they're right on the edge of relinquishment, or are they calling you early on? And we want to go ahead and encourage people to keep those questions coming so we can let the presenters know what you're wondering about. But first question is it happening early on or right when they're right there?
So that is a fantastic question. It is, it's actually, I would say, 50-50. We definitely want people to call before they're on the breaking point. But we do receive a lot of calls from people who are on the breaking point, and I'll actually get more into this in a little bit of the importance of putting space between the call and the actual surrender appointment, but it's about 50-50. Okay, awesome. So it looks like
everybody who answered
would like these scripts, so that is awesome, and I'm really happy and I'm excited to share these with you. And the coolest thing about these scripts is that they're really easy to customize for your own shelter. For example, this is an email script to use if somebody can't find pet-friendly housing. And as you can see, the script has some red text that says insert rehoming tips and insert rescue list. So this is a great opportunity to customize the script to that individual person that you're helping. Just for an example, if you're sending this to somebody who needs to surrender their Chihuahua because they can't find a place to live with their Chihuahua, you can actually just insert a list of local Chihuahua rescues in your area and groups who specialize in small dogs. And these scripts, of course, are always changing and evolving as time goes on, and we realize what works and maybe what doesn't work. Since I used housing as an example, I'll keep going with that one. When we were first creating scripts, we only had one housing issue script, and it was a catch-all for everything. And within the first few weeks of using these scripts, it became really clear that housing issues was much more nuanced, and we have since created several additional housing scripts. We have this can't find pet-friendly housing, and then a completely separate one for landlord issues. So when you're customizing these scripts for your shelter, can't find pet-friendly housing might include websites and links that list pet-friendly apartments or roommate finders in your community. Landlord issues might include laws and tenant rights. We actually spent a little bit of time at City Hall just trying to wrap our heads around San Francisco tenant rights. So this is a bit time-consuming, but it is completely worth it. And once we started using these scripts, we found 3 immediate benefits to just having these conversations, and that's education, opportunity, and time. So early on in every surrender conversation, we'll just ask the simple question, can you tell me what you've tried so far? And people have no idea what we're talking about. One of the biggest challenges we have isn't figuring out a solution to keeping pets in their home or helping with private rehoming, but it's actually debunking the myth that shelters are the #1 place for animals. We all know that animals can really quickly shut down and deteriorate in the shelter environment. So while calling a shelter is a good option, it isn't the only option, and we can actually step in and help find alternatives. If we can't prevent a surrender, is there at least a way to prevent an animal from coming into the shelter through private rehoming? It's definitely worth a try, and that just starts with educating callers and the public that the shelter isn't this, happy, cuddly, go-to option. It actually should be the very last resort, which leads to the next benefit of opportunity. So this goes back to the question that somebody asked a few minutes ago, if we can catch them early on or at their breaking point. So opportunity over the phone is incredible. If an animal is displaying some unwanted behavior, we can actually step in and offer to help. If it's a medical issue, we can see if we can offer some medical resources or discounted medical care through some sort of charity program, or offer a free spay-neuter, or just get somebody signed up for a free training class. Something that I use every single day and is such a free, great resource is our library. And that's available to everybody. It's at sfspca.org/behavior. And this is a great place to start. Most of these documents were created by our board-certified behaviorist, Dr. Janine Berger. And I highly encourage everybody to check it out. And please feel free to use whatever materials that you would find helpful. And then there's time, which we're actually finding out is a huge factor in whether somebody will go through with the surrender or not. So if the person is already in the shelter with the animal and with every intention to surrender, it's pretty hard to talk them down at that point. They've made a commitment somewhere in their head to leave without the animal. So the brilliant thing about booking a surrender appointment is actually twofold. So first, it just makes sense logistically by planning what's coming in and when. you can make sure that the shelter isn't overwhelmed and that there's always adequate spacing and staffing. But it also gives the buffer of time to put between the breaking point of when the person is calling and then actually showing up at the shelter with the animal. So what we're finding over and over is if somebody calls to surrender, even if at that point they're not interested in help or keeping the animal, we'll still have a conversation with them and we'll still send resources along with a confirmation of their surrender appointment. And if there's a good solid week or two between the call and incident that finally made them pick up the phone and the actual surrender appointment, often that's enough time for them to cool down and maybe read over our materials, maybe call back for more advice, or best case, they call and cancel their appointment. So all of this does sound a little crazy at first, but just putting a little bit of space and offering just a little bit of help and letting people know that we are a resource and helping to fight in their corner truly can turn everything around.
Lisa, we have a question. Is your call center staff made up of full-time employees, part-time employees, or volunteers, or a combination?
It's a combination of full-time and part-time employees. We are a very large call center who also book appointments for our hospital and spay and neuter clinic. The surrenders is one piece of those phone calls. This program can definitely be done with a volunteer or a part-time or full-time employee, just depending on the size and scope of your shelter. So I'm going to give my favorite example, and it is Miss Irene and Gizmo. So Irene called us in tears. She had adopted a kitten named Gizmo from us in 2007 and needed to return her ASAP. So Irene loved this cat. This cat was her whole world, her constant companion, but she lived in a group home and was facing eviction because of the cat. So one of our associates just started the conversation, something along the lines of, you aren't alone. A lot of people have faced housing difficulties with their pets. So it's really obvious you care about Gizmo. Can you give me just a little more information? Because we want to help you and Gizmo as best as we can. And once Irene had calmed down a bit, our associate was able to get a little more information. Irene actually was allowed to have the cat in her home, but recently the cat started urinating outside of the litter box, and management told her that the cat had to go. During the conversation, Irene made kind of an offhand comment that she started using the fancy litter and got a really fancy pink princess litter box. So we know that cats can be a little finicky, and this set off some flags in the associate's head. And while we still booked the surrender appointment for Irene, we asked her if she would just be willing to go back to the old box and old litter between the call and the actual appointment. When the associate sent the surrender appointment confirmation email, she included a document with helpful tips for cats who have stopped urinating outside of their litter box. So while we didn't prevent Irene from booking a surrender, we were at least able to have a meaningful conversation and put some time between her heightened emotional state and the actual appointment. So a few days passed, and we received another call from Irene. She was over the moon. She called to tell us that Gizmo absolutely loves her old box and old litter and hadn't had an accident since the fancy box was removed from the premise. And Irene was actually calling to cancel her surrender appointment. And Gizmo was able to stay in her home with her loving mom and her non-fancy litter. And something that's really important to remember is you aren't going to hit home runs every time. But if you can even keep 1 out of 50 animals from walking through your door, it does add up. It really boosts staff morale. It has an impact on the shelter. But most importantly, it has an impact on that one animal. Whether he goes from one loving home to another or stays happily in his current home, that's one less animal who has to go through the stress or trauma of the shelter.
Lisa, we got a few questions in, so I thought we might pause and address them. The next one is, do your staff have vet knowledge, and do they give vet advice also?
So some of them do have vet knowledge. We have a few former technicians in our call center. However, we do not give medical advice over the phone, other than encouraging people to come in, or let's say somebody's calling because a cat's eye looks really puffy. The most medical advice that we can actually legally give over the phone is just to book an appointment and come on in. So people are trained to the extent of knowing what's an emergency and what needs to come in, but we don't give medical advice.
Here's another question. It sounds like you use your front desk staff as call center people? Question. What do you do to manage these calls, which I'm guessing take longer, while at the same time managing, scheduling appointments, et cetera, and providing good customer service?
We actually have our call center is separate from the front desk, so we're in a completely different office on our campus. And the reason, actually, the history behind the call center was for that purpose. It was very hard to give great customer service while the phone is ringing and people are in your face, animals are being handed to you, so we separated them out. We were receiving such a large volume of calls that it just made sense to have two different departments.
Great, thanks.
Awesome. So since March of 2014, we have prevented over 320 animals from entering the shelter, which is just about 30% of all of our surrender calls. And this is actually where tracking comes in handy, and I'm going to hand it over to Cynthia for a moment.
Hi, so I'm just going to pop in here and talk a little bit about Salesforce. Lisa has mentioned it, but some of you might not know about Salesforce. It's a cloud-based platform that provides a wide range of ways to hold, manage, and track customer information. Plus, it provides easy ways to communicate with anyone in your community that you're managing in Salesforce. So that could be volunteers or donors or clients. One of the really nice things about Salesforce is they have a foundation that's dedicated to helping nonprofits use the Salesforce platform. And part of that is providing 10 free licenses to any nonprofit that wants to get started on Salesforce. And those are 10 free licenses, not just for a short time, but for the foreseeable future. They also have a free fundraising program and also a free volunteer management program. Their free fundraising platform is called the Nonprofit Starter Pack, and the volunteer management program is called Volunteers for Salesforce. Here at the San Francisco SPCA, we're using Salesforce for a wide variety of things, volunteer management, feral cat management. But this program that Lisa's presenting to you today was the first implementation of Salesforce for us. And we're using something called their Service Cloud. And the Service Cloud is generally used by call centers to track and manage people who call in and their information and the process, where you are in the process. So you can definitely implement a fantastic surrender program just using an Excel spreadsheet, which is how we started. But I just wanted to mention Salesforce and let you know that I think we're a lot more effective with Salesforce. The Service Cloud is really easy to use. Training the staff only took about 90 minutes. It's very intuitive. And when we use it, we can easily search. When somebody calls, we can search to see if they're already set up in the database. And if not, we can set up a new contact and input contact information about them and information about their pet. And as soon as we input the surrender reason, Salesforce suggests a script. And they can automatically, with the contact information, send an email to the caller with information attached about the behavior or medical problem that they're describing to us. So it just makes the call very easy. Also, when they call back later on, it's easy for us to pull up the information from the last call and see where we are in the process with them and what they've been told. And then we can track any open calls and do follow-up calls. So it makes tracking really very good. And there's very good reporting capabilities that are really easy to use. They allow you to be more proactive with your programs. Data does that. You can look at where calls are coming from. You can track surrender reasons. You can look at script effectiveness. You can review open cases. So this data can help you develop proactive programs to get ahead of issues. So, for example, if you run a report on surrender data and notice there's a lot of calls about dog behavior coming from one particular neighborhood, you can look into having maybe free dog training classes in that community. That's an example of something that we've done, knowing that there were a lot of behavior cases coming from one area in San Francisco. So all this is a way of saying, take a look at Salesforce. Don't be daunted by it, but don't let technology be a hurdle to making it happen. Excel's a great way to start and a great way to sort of learn what works or doesn't work in your own community. And then also, if you go the Excel route, since we started that way, Lisa can give you some examples of templates to use.
Great. So using a telephone and conversation to prevent animals from coming into the shelter not only benefits the animal, but it helps educate and build trust within the community. And you're able to collect meaningful data, which can only help your programs. The more data that's collected, the more effective this program becomes as you analyze and refine the process. The phone, a script, and a simple conversation truly is effective in preventing surrenders.
So we have a number of questions coming in. So we'll just start here, but I encourage anybody who's listening who has questions to submit them. Question: if you have plenty of space for housing the animal, do you still make appointments and give the same amount of buffer space to allow for a change of heart?
We do. As long as we feel like the pet isn't in danger, of course. But yes, giving the space is incredibly helpful, and you can actually play with it. That's sort of where we're in the phase now. When we first started this, we were just booking the day after or as soon as we could get somebody in. We realized once we were full and had to book out several weeks or several days, we had more people canceling and more people just not showing up. So we thought we would play with that a little bit, and even at times that we did have space, on purpose we would book a week out or 2 weeks out, and we were finding and still find that little bit of space along with the resource really helps. So yeah, that's a fantastic question.
So how could a very small organization manage this without a call center or Salesforce?
Honestly, with the scripts and with pre-made information and doing research and having all of this information already available, this could actually easily be done with a high-level volunteer, a highly trained volunteer. You can do it even on email. We have both phone and email scripts, so you could create a separate email inbox for surrenders and then just use those scripts. Maybe have just one staff member or a volunteer, however you want to do it. If a telephone just isn't feasible, I would suggest going the email route.
And I would just add to that before we did Salesforce, we had the scripts just in a folder on the computer and divided up into different folders so they were relatively easy to access. So you could definitely do it that way. What is the most common problem you get asked about that you have the best track record at solving without a relinquishment resulting?
Yeah, that's a great question. At this point, having a baby is definitely our most successful script. I think we just have the most resource and information for that. And we found a lot of people are just a bit in panic mode and can put some space and talk with them. The most common reason that people are surrendering that we're finding right now tends to be allergies and housing. But our highest success is for babies at this point.
Can Salesforce templates be shared and then edited? Example, if I signed up for Salesforce, would I be able to use the templates the SFSPCA has created? So yeah, Salesforce is just easily configurable to the kind of contact information that you want to save about people. You could certainly set it up the exact same way we have, but Salesforce is easily configurable if you want to for example, capture something that we might not be capturing, like salutation. And then the scripts can be customized. So you could start with our scripts if you wanted to, or take our scripts and make some changes to it, but it's easy to set up scripts, and then over time as you learn and find out what's specific to your community, you can update and change those scripts.
And we often edit our own scripts just to tailor it to that specific client and their need. All of these scripts are generalized and kind of high overview with helpful tips, but yeah, we edit them all the time.
Does the SFSPCA still have a post-adoption or behavior helpline? How does the call center interact with the helpline?
We pretty much take all of the calls. We make the post-adoption calls. Are you familiar with the behavior hotline?
No.
Okay.
Yeah. No, we don't. We generally don't have the same behavior hotline that we had many years ago. We encourage people to call into our call center, and if there are behavior issues, they are referred either to our adoption center or to our behavior team. So the call center is the point of first contact. For most of the time, they can either address the issue or send the person information from all the handouts that we have set up, or if it's something more detailed than that, then we escalate it to the next level, and that person gets a call back. Are there problems you most dread hearing that you find the hardest to solve?
Yes, and this will definitely depend on where you're living and what community you're in. Right now, San Francisco is in a bit of a housing crisis, and we are receiving just so many calls from people who can't find pet-friendly housing or any housing, or having landlord issues, or they're getting kicked out of their house because their landlord wants to rent to somebody without dogs. So that's pretty heartbreaking, and that's just something that our community is dealing with right now.
How do people hear about your call center? Do they think they're just calling about surrender, or do they expect help? The call center answers every line for the SPCA, so the main line, the hospital line. We have a phone tree that, press 1 for hospital, press 2 for adoptions. It all comes to us. Right now, we do some advertising on our website just saying, need us, please call, and it comes to us. I don't think we have been doing this quite long enough to really be out there right now as a huge helpful resource, but we're trying. We definitely want to get to that point where before the breaking point happens of somebody wanting to surrender, we want to be that resource where they will call in and get their behavior advice or housing advice or whatever they need. And we also try to encourage, so the surrender section of our website has links to our behavior library, and we do try to get people to consider alternatives before they even call us. But then on the website, it directs people to call the call center. Are cat or dog problems most common on your calls?
It depends on what the issue is. Dogs in housing is a big issue. Cats and litter box is also a pretty big issue. We do have a really good success rate with cats and litter boxes. For the most part, it can either be a simple medical fix like a UTI or a behavior fix, which we have a lot of resources to. But it's honestly a pretty even split.
Although we adopt out, from the adoption center, we adopt out about twice as many cats as dogs. So I'd say percentage-wise, it's probably percentage more about dogs. What percentage of call center calls are people with post-adoption calls issues? And what about questions that foster caregivers have about caring for their foster pets? Do those go through the call center?
So the foster, we actually have a separate foster line. So we do not handle the foster calls. But as far as post-adoption calls, actually, if we go back to slide 15.
Oops, sorry. There we go.
So let's see, the recent adopt or recent acquire right now is about 19% of all of our calls thinking about surrendering or calling to surrender. And those ones are interesting. We definitely we'll give help and advice. Sometimes with those, it's just a matter of there hasn't been enough time to bond with the animal yet. We're pretty successful at helping those cases.
What medical software does the SFSPCA use, and do they copy over client communication from Salesforce to the medical software to keep track of the animal's medical file, or is it kept separate? Right now we have two hospitals, and they're unfortunately on two different systems. We use Cornerstone at one hospital, and we use Infinity Impromed at the other hospital. Right at the moment, Salesforce is not speaking to either system. We are in the process of converting our Cornerstone information over to Infinity Impromed, and at that time, we're hoping to create a connection between software and our medical software. But this is a little further down our grand plan of having all the information in one place. Do you contract with government animal control that picks up animals upon request, including owner surrenders, and brings them to your shelter? No, we don't do that. There's a San Francisco Animal Care and Control, and they manage their own surrender and intake process. Christy, do we have any more questions?
No, but if people want to ask more, that would be great.
I have a little plug in the meantime. This is Kate. And we've gotten a few questions about how does this work in situations that aren't San Francisco, and I think the presenters have done a great job of offering their thoughts on that. But the reason the Million Cat Challenge was created was in large part to bring forward the solutions that are happening in all different kinds of shelters and all different kinds of communities. So I want to really encourage you who are listening to this now live, who are listening to this later as an archived version. One, recruit your neighbors into the Million Cat Challenge. We all win. The more different kinds of shelters, the more different kinds of regions, the more different kinds of models and challenges and housing and other issues that might be prevalent in a given community. We all benefit the more variety that we have in the Million Cat Challenge. And also, bring this to the Million Cat discussion group. We'll have information at the end about how to sign up if you haven't signed up, but really encourage all the members of your team to join the Million Cat discussion group and bring forward your solutions. I know that there are shelters participating in this webinar or viewing this webinar later that do have government contracts, that have dealt with the issue of government contracts or animal control partners bringing in owner-surrendered animals on an unscheduled basis, whether that's through adjusting the contract or providing some incentive to divert those intakes. So there are solutions out there. There are probably solutions for housing issues. There are probably shelters out there that have their own scripts that they're using that they're finding successful. So that's the place to share that information, or if you want to do your own webinar for us, this is how we spread the success of this movement, is by having each shelter share the solutions that work for them. That gave you a little time to think up more questions. And I had just a quick one, which is I've thought about using Salesforce for our equivalent of a call center, which is our shelter medicine frequently asked questions. I've been wondering, what's the learning curve like? Am I going to have to spend a month learning how to use it, or is it pretty intuitive and I can figure it out in a few days of effort?
Is this Salesforce?
Yeah.
So Salesforce is pretty intuitive, but it would be, I would recommend getting somebody who knows Salesforce already to kind of give you the lay of the land and help you get set up. It wouldn't take a lot of hours, and if you're in the Bay Area, I can certainly help match you up with people here in the Bay Area who can help get people set up on Salesforce. And if you're outside the Bay Area, I can certainly put out some feelers and find people in other places who can come and get you set up and kind of give you a little hands-on training. We got our service cloud up with about 10 hours from an outside consultant, about 10 hours of help and just sort of setting up the fields and making us feel comfortable and helping us put the scripts in.
Thanks. That's a very generous offer. You might see me.
Yeah, no, we'd be happy to help. And as a matter of fact, yesterday we had somebody, a Salesforce employee, was in adopting a cat, Cole, very handsome black cat, and she offered to help anybody pro bono. So I have at least one pro bono offer from a Salesforce employee to get people set up.
So we had another.
Two more questions, yeah.
So what's the most common question you receive regarding community cats? The most common question we receive is, should I bring this cat in? Or when can I bring this cat in? Or can I surrender to your shelter? We actually have a community cat department here, which offer their assistance. And Cynthia might actually be able to speak a bit more about that.
Yeah, so we have a community cats program here that is, we basically have a campaign out to the community, do you see cats? And then we encourage people, if they see feral or free-roaming cats, to call us. And then we've actually built a community cat mapping database in Salesforce. Maybe that's a different webinar, where we are tracking the cats that we know about in San Francisco and tracking where kittens are coming from, tracking where we have volunteers. And so when somebody actually calls us, we can look up that neighborhood and see if it's a cat that we already know about, and then try to match a new cat that's off our radar with sending out a staff or volunteer to go and trap that cat. And then we have a Salesforce question here. Each license is for a user. Do you have more than 10 users, or do your users share accounts, and what is the cost beyond the 10? So Salesforce requires that each individual person who's using Salesforce have a separate license. And for tracking purposes, if you want to track your staff or volunteers to see what calls they've taken, how long they're on the phone, any of those sorts of things, you definitely want each person to have a different user. We have slightly more than 10 users, so we do pay for each license, and I think it's something like $325 per license per year for the additional beyond 10. I think we're using about 13 or 14 licenses. Okay, I think we're finished. Thank you very much for having us. We really appreciate it. We're so excited about this program, and we're really thrilled to share it. And if there are any follow-up questions or anything else we can do to help anybody out there, definitely reach out to the Million Cat Challenge, and they'll forward it on to us and let us know.
We wanted to thank you.
Sorry, go ahead.
We just wanted to thank you so much for sharing your story with us and for your generous offer to share your scripts with all of our challengers. I know they'll be excited to reap the rewards of all your hard work and discovery. So thank you very much. You guys, we're going to be posting those in the Million Cat Challenge Yahoo group. So if you're interested in the San Francisco SPCA scripts and the link to this webinar, you'll find it in the Yahoo group.
And remember, if you have any questions now or later, if you're listening to this a year from now in an archived version and you're not sure about that group, just email us at info@millioncatchallenge.org, and we'll get you all signed up. It's a painless process.
That's right. And we do have one final reminder. Our Alternatives to Intake campaign continues through February, so we'll be bringing you 2 more webinars next month. And again, you can find all the details for that in our Yahoo group. But in the meantime, we want to make sure you save the date for February 2nd at 6 p.m. and February 23rd at 12 p.m.
And I believe that's Pacific time.
Pacific. Thank you again, SPCA, SFSPCA. We very much enjoyed hearing your story and your time.
Thanks all of you for being so awesome. Look forward to seeing you on the Million Cat discussion group.